Okay, cool. So welcome. Thank you for coming to our portfolio and resume workshop. This is the third event in our series, and if you've been coming to all of them, we really appreciate it. This one was actually supposed to be like a stress relief workshop, but the lady canceled on us at the last minute, so that's why everything was kind of planned last minute and there's not as many people, but we still appreciate everyone who came, and we're all going to learn a lot today. Okay, so this is being recorded, and we're going to post the recording on the APX Scopus YouTube channel, and we'll send a link out to everyone who registered with that in case they want to review it. Well, this is... and then so our next event is going to be a Sketchup and Enscape workshop run by our design students. And it's going to be on November 10th at 6:30 p.m. So 2 Tuesdays from now. And we'll be sending out more information about that soon. If you want to keep up with our events, you can follow us on Instagram at APX Scopus. And also, if you're interested in joining APX, we're having our next recruitment event this Friday at 5:30 p.m. And our last recruitment event is going to be this Saturday at 2 p.m. If you want more information about that, you can email me back, you can privately DM me, or you can reach out to any of our members, and they all have that information. So without further ado, leading our workshop is Tim Tamilones, who's very dear to us. He's been helping us out a lot. He is a 5th year at the School of Architecture, a software expert, and a fellow APX brother. And we're so happy that he's here to help us. So Tim, do you have anything to say before we start?
No, thank you for the introduction. I'm very excited to lead another workshop, and I hope that everyone here is excited to hopefully learn some stuff. As Gio said, today we'll be covering V-Ray and Photoshop. Sorry, it's sharing my screen. Which many of you probably have a brief introduction to, or maybe even a thorough introduction to, but hopefully we'll all learn something today. Before I get started, I saw that there was a question in the chat, and I want to take this time to let you know, if you have a question, this is very, very informal, so just unmute yourself if you're comfortable. Otherwise, post it in the chat, and either Gio or someone else may speak up for you. But yeah, feel free at any point to interject. Again, this is all supposed to be fairly casual. So yeah, welcome everyone. I'm very excited to see so many people here. And yeah, let's get started. So as Gio mentioned, this is hosted by APX, and I am myself a member. And this is the 3rd event this fall, and there will be more to come. So today we'll be covering a few different items within V-Ray and Photoshop. First, we'll start out in Rhino with V-Ray, with scene selection, material application, light, render options, render elements, post-render edits, and then move into Photoshop, where we'll be working with filters, different selection tools, background, and layering. And this is a good time to mention, if you didn't notice already, Gio sent out an email earlier today with a series of images and the Rhino model that we'll be using. And hopefully by the end of the workshop, we can come up with a render looking something like this. It's pretty quick to do, and hopefully you can follow along, and we'll end up with a render that looks similar, hopefully. And you should have all of the material required in either the photos or the model, depending on which way you want to do it, and if you have V-Ray. Also,
sorry, Tim, if anyone for whatever reason didn't get the file, I was having a lot of trouble sending them out. Just message me privately and with your email, and I'll send it to you. Okay. And I think someone has a question.
Yes. Is it in the chat?
Yeah. I just have a quick question. I noticed that when I loaded up the render that there are several materials missing. I was wondering if there is like a folder with the materials used in the render.
Okay, yeah, I was a little concerned about that because of course I can't check that. I have all of the materials on my computer. What is it, an error message that says like cancel or okay? I think it is.
It was a window that popped up after I opened up V-Ray in the model, and it listed I think 20 or so
Okay.
material set.
Well, in that case, if you just want to follow along, your render may come out with some of the materials missing, and then you can kind of follow back in with the images that Geo sent out and just put those into Photoshop, and we'll work from there. Unfortunately, I did get a lot of these materials and models offline. I got them from flyingarchitect.com. It's a good resource for models, textures, anything Rhino and V-Ray related, and a lot of it is free. But yeah, apparently it comes with consequences. Not everyone will be able to access all of the materials. But hopefully,
can you type that URL into the chat so people have it?
yes. You won't need that for today.
Just for the future.
Yeah. Okay, what is it? If that doesn't bring you to the exact link, just type in Flying Architect into the Google search bar and it'll be the first thing that comes up. All right, and so with that, if you have the model, you can open it. Probably going to have to switch, right? And in this time, also beware, you have to be logged in to Sura or on the school network with V-Ray downloaded to get the licensor to use the software. Sorry, still getting used to Zoom. All right, can everyone see my screen? The Rhino model, good? Okay, great. So this is the model you should have been given, very basic, kind of threw it together the other night. And this is the scene that we'll be working on. All of these components here are downloaded from Flying Architect, the source that I just posted in the chat. If you want to look at their resources, there's a lot of good modeling material there. And so the first thing that you want to do is go up to render, check your current render, and make sure that you're in V-Ray for Rhino. And then after that, it should kind of load in and we'll be ready to go. And so we're first going to want to start off with assigning different materials into the space. And for that, you're going to go to V-Ray, open Asset Editor, and the window should pop up here. You can see the window, right? Just, this hasn't occurred to me, but.
No.
Sorry?
No.
You can't see the Asset Editor window.
Not on your screen.
Oh dear.
You might have to share the whole screen instead of sharing one window.
Yeah, okay.
And I just posted an image link of the materials pop-up box.
Okay. Does anyone know how to share the whole screen? Well, I guess we'll just have to jump back and forth from now then. Sorry about that. But here you have the asset editor, which then plugs back into the materials in Rhino. And so we're first going to start off with the materials here on the top left. And if you click this tab here to open up the library of materials, and we'll get started. So first, in the Rhino model, I'm going to select the floor. Sorry, I realize you can't see what I'm doing here. But if you select just the basic floor, And then we're going to assign the material to that. Sorry about this. All gets fairly confusing when you're screen sharing. So going to try that again. So sorry. Hopefully this will get faster once we move into Photoshop. Okay, and so we're going to put the floor as a wood material. You can have a wooden floor. And so you're going to scroll down, find wood, and laminate. And you select that, and it'll bring up a series of options for different wooden materials. And based on the scene, I think we're going to want kind of a tamer, less red veneer like this one here. And then you're just going to click and drag into here. And it'll come up with all of the material options, but the preset I think is pretty good. So we're just going to go to the material list and find it down here. Now, to apply it to the floor, you're going to right click and apply to selection. Assuming you've already selected the floor, this should apply that texture onto the floor, and we can work from there. Next, if you select the walls, we're going to use a generic material for the walls. So you're going to come down here to add material and add a generic material. Then we can rename this as wall paint. And for this scene, we're going to want to paint these walls white. So you're going to go into quick settings here, open up the color and bring it to white. Now, realistically, white is never a perfect white that you find on a computer. So you're going to want to bring it just below the actual white just to get that real look and color to it. And then we can close that. And there's also a lot of other options that you can kind of toy around with in here. Also, you can change the material in here to all of these different options, which will then present different options in here and give the material a different quality. And so back to the material list, to apply this to the wall, you're going to right click and apply to selection. And next, there's a carpet on the center of the scene that we're going to try painting with a another material. Probably want to try fabric for a carpet. And so you're going to look through the fabrics, find a material that you think fits that fabric. This wool looks interesting. You can click and drag and it'll give you a bit of a bigger view here, so you can start to see kind of the material texture and everything that will come through with that. So maybe this isn't what you want, and you can go and find another one. Delete that one, and then you can go and find another one in the material selection. So maybe you want this one a bit smoother, a bit richer. And so you can right click that and apply to selection. I'm not going to go through all of the materials today because I think that will get very redundant, as you may have already noticed. So I just want to stop and make sure everyone's followed along and is able to apply different materials to their scene. If anyone has a question about that, please speak up. Otherwise, we're going to move on to lighting strategies. I will move back to the Rhino screen. All right, and so now we're back in the scene, and we have some of the materials selected. and done. Oh, I should actually, for glass too, that's actually very important. There's a glass category in the material selection panel. My preferred glass is glass neutral. I think it has the best qualities for realistic window glass rather than their generic glass option. And that is glass neutral again, to apply kind of a good window, or if you're doing like a glass cup or something, it's good for that as well. But now we're going to try to find the lighting settings that we're looking for. And so to start this, you're going to want to go to V-Ray and Ray Traced. And hopefully this will take a second to load, but it'll come up with kind of the render and where the light will go, and we can determine how we want to position the sun within the scene based on that light. So hopefully this comes up quickly. Otherwise, maybe the render option is going to be faster for us, assuming my computer can handle this. Okay, there we go. And so now you have basically a generic preview of what we're going to be looking at once we render the scene. Again, it's pretty general, but you can begin to understand where the light is coming in from and how it will affect the scene. It seems to really be lagging my computer quite a bit at the moment, but hopefully we can get through that. For sake of presentation, I think I'm just going to have to stick with the render option. Unfortunately, it seems my computer can't handle zoom and ray tracing. So sorry about this, give it a moment. Also, just a general note on rendering, this happens a lot. It's often a very heavy file, very heavy render, and then your computer's trying to work pretty hard to compute everything. So your computer will often slow down a bit. And sometimes it is best to kind of settle for the less perfect option. In this case, that might be using the render setting rather than the ray trace setting. And then you're going to go to render tools and select the sun. And here you're going to want to make sure that your sun is checked on. And you have two options here. You can do manual control or use global positioning and time. Because this model isn't in a specific place or have a specific time, I'm just going to choose manual control here and then toggle these to find where the sun comes in and kind of set that scene up how I want and how I visualize this as the best kind of to express how this works. And so I'm going to choose somewhere probably around here, say that looks pretty good. And of course you can also toggle the altitude of the sun and the angle that it comes in, have it stop shorter or farther. And so yeah, you can play around with that and really kind of figure out exactly what you're looking for in the lighting. And I think this is a very important component to setting up the scene of a render, just because you begin to really model how you want this space to be experienced and how you want the light to interact with it. And so we're going to say that looks pretty good. So we close that. The next thing that you're going to want to do is find the view that you want to render. And so to do that, you're going to want to make sure you have nothing selected. And then come to the properties in your tab here. And then we're going to be using these different components in camera and target to set up the scene. So to begin, the lens length is very important for setting up how wide of an angle you want this to be. So the standard is going to be 50 on Rhino. And you'll see that that kind of zooms us in and has a much more closed space there. And then I had it, I believe, at 35. which will begin to zoom out, and you can go lower to say 15, and you'll get really wide angle of the space. Kind of makes it look incredibly empty. But we're gonna say that 35 looked pretty good, so we'll go back to that. Next, what you're gonna wanna do is set your Z location. And this is basically how high above the floor is your camera. So the floor is at 0, meaning that this is going to be that exact value. Typically, you're going to wanna stick between 5 foot and 5'6", just because that's about eye level. So we're gonna say 5 exactly, and that should bump us up just a little bit. And then you're gonna wanna come down to the Z target and make sure that the Z target matches the Z location. So the Z location is at 5, and so the Z target will be at 5. And that should straighten out your screen and allow you to have these vertical lines which begin to kind of open up the space and capture the kind of orthogonal qualities of it. And it will also make it easier when you're in Photoshop in the next steps, placing a background and doing scene selection. And so from here, it looks like we're zoomed in a little bit too much, so you can use these different tools up here to begin to navigate the scene and really set it up the way you want. So we might zoom out a little bit here. And there you have kind of a scene that's looking pretty good. And so you're going to open Asset Editor again, and I apologize, I'm going to have to switch back. Again, in this transition, if anyone has any questions, this is a good time to speak up. And so here we are back in Asset Editor.
Quick question.
Oh, yes, please.
Why don't you use the interactive render on V-Ray?
That's certainly an option, but it's kind of the same thing as the ray trace option. It just, my computer wouldn't be able to handle it with Zoom. I think that's certainly a good point for setting up a scene. The ray trace it should be kind of the next step in this. And maybe I was considering trying it, but after seeing how the ray trace ended up, it might not be the best idea. But essentially what he's talking about there is in this drop-down menu, you have the render with V-Ray interactive, and that will bring up a interactive display showing what's on your screen in Rhino and translating that live into V-Ray to a progressively updating render system. And so if you change the view or you change any settings, you'll see that update live in the V-Ray interactive panel. But unfortunately, as I said, I don't think that's really going to work as I am running Zoom. It is incredibly computer intensive. It takes up a lot of your CPU. So maybe today it's best I don't try that. Don't want to crash my computer. But again, good note, and certainly a helpful tool. And so the next step that we're going to be doing is going into the settings. And as you can see, there's quite a few here to choose from. And so first we're going to start with the camera and the exposure value. Now this is one place where the V-Ray interactive is especially helpful. You can begin to actually change this, make it darker or make it lighter, depending on the exposure value that you set here. Will allow a different amount of light into the aperture of the camera, essentially the same way that you work with real photography. And so you also have the depth of field. You can play around with different effects, vignette, but really we're going to want to stay in this section and then in the render output section. And also in this tab here under render elements. Also environment. So I guess we'll start with environment. You're going to want to try to go environment, and then up in this upper left corner of the pop-up tab, you're going to click and find sky, which is here. And this will give the kind of ambient lighting to your render and give it a bit more of a realistic quality. And then back, and so that should be good. And then here you have the render pixels. So we're at 16 by 90, and I mean, that seems pretty fair for now, but you can change that and it should update depending on your ratio to whatever you've typed here. And then you can also change your ratio if you want to these different options. But I think it's best we stick with the 1600, and that should update back to 900, perfect. And then back up here with the exposure value, you can change that, but I know that 10 is going to work pretty well for us. So we'll just keep it there for now. And I think, oh, of course, the render elements. And so this is going to be a pretty big part of my workshop today, is introduction to render elements. I find it something that most people don't use or don't take advantage of, but they can be incredibly useful. And so you see here, I have these different elements selected. If you want to select more or select these ones, you're going to click just at the bottom here and then scroll through. They have a list of quite a few. I can't say I know what all of them do, but I know they're all very useful, and they can all be used to apply different features, different elements into your render post effect. So these are going to pop out different images into a file, and unfortunately, once you render the image, you can access what these look like, but you can't save them. I don't know why. It's incredibly frustrating. But if you set a, in render output, if you set a destination for the file path, you can ensure that these are going to be saved into a specific folder on your computer. And you see here, I have kind of the file path. And if you want to take a moment to set that up, and then I think we're going to be good to render. And all of these are provided in the material or the image packet that Geo sent out earlier today. And so if you are unsure of what to do here, you can just kind of follow along with the next steps that we'll see shortly in Photoshop with the images that Geo had sent. All right, and so with that, I think it seems like everything is good to go and we're good to render. So all we're going to do is select render with V-Ray up here, and it should open the box. And you can't see that.
Is there somewhere where you can set up the, I guess, drop down that you have on the right? Because mine doesn't have render elements. It has global illumination, and it has render parameters, advanced camera parameters, volumetric environment, denoiser, and configuration.
And those are all in these tabs here.
Yeah, those are the tabs I have.
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. This is kind of how it was set up for me. Trying to think. I have struggled with render elements in the past. So is there a place where I had to turn them on? I'm sorry.
I think for this version of V-Ray, it is on top, like next to the fourth one, next to the light. No, next to the cube, the geometries on top. Can you find it? Yeah.
I'll look for it. So at the, oh, okay, I see it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. See, you learned something new. Sorry about that. And if anyone else is having a similar issue, maybe someone can type it in the chat how they found it and how they resolved that. But for now, I'm going to stop screen sharing and we're going to move to the render page. Okay, there we go. And so as you can see here, there's kind of noise. That's just this. And so here you have the output, and you can use this drop-down menu to go through all of your different elements, which are currently loaded as my last render. So apologies for that. But as this renders, you can actually begin to kind of work on the final product. If you go to the very bottom left corner, show corrections controls, it'll bring up this dialog box, and you can begin to kind of play around with the different elements. So as you can see, this is what the renderer is currently working on, but if you kind of play around with these, you can begin to tone down the different light elements. And just generally based on this, it means that my exposure was wrong. Maybe 10 wasn't the ideal exposure, but unfortunately now it's a little late, and that's fine because we can begin to actually edit it post-production here, and it updates it live back to the render. And so yeah, you have a bunch of different options here, from saturation, white balance, color balance, levels, curves, and a few other options. For the most part, I stay up in the first three. Sometimes I play around with the curves, and that just gives you different differentiation between light and dark spots, and different contrasts and different patterns there. But yeah, as I said, mostly I stick to these different elements, and you can kind of play around with that. Just make sure that before you make sure that that box is checked above. So if you want super red, super blue, don't know in what setting you need that, but you have it there. So yeah, and instead of waiting for this to render, I think we're just going to jump into Photoshop since I have those files kind of ready to go. So I'm just going to click stop, and the render will pause where it is, and we'll move over to Photoshop. So if anyone has any questions, this transition is probably the best time. We won't be moving back to V-Ray again. So I see there's something in the chat. Oh, apparently my mic is soft. Is anyone else having an issue with audio here?
You sound like really far away, but like we can hear you. But
Interesting. Okay, apologies.
I don't know, like maybe if you lean in more, if it'll make it more clear, but perfect.
Okay.
Fine,
Sorry about that. Hopefully, yeah, you can hear me. Because unfortunately, I think that's my laptop, and there's not much I can do about it. But thank you for letting me know, and sorry. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to do is move into Photoshop. And let me just clear up my Photoshop real quick. Just so that I don't reuse the old file. So here we have Photoshop. So we're going to just open, and sorry if you can see my files, they're quite a mess. And we're going to find the base model of the background. Yes. Okay, and so here you have the generic render output without any of the different elements applied to it. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of noise in this render. So one of the things that we're going to want to do first before moving on to anything else is actually switch this one out for the render that has been denoised. Now the denoiser was one of the render elements that we had, and it works to kind of eliminate a lot of the noise in the background there, as you'll see momentarily. And so yeah, you can start to see kind of the difference. This loads in between the two. One of the differences is that they're misplaced. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. And so now we have this one, which is strangely off center. And if you zoom in, you can see there's still a little bit of noise there. So if you want, you can go to filter. If you have the layer selected, you can go to filter, noise, and reduce noise. And this will come up with a pop-up menu. You can play around with the strength of that reduction. Zoom in a little bit to see the detail there. And you can kind of play around it and determine what you want that to look like. And as you can see, the more you play around with this and the stronger you make it, the smoother those surfaces begin to become. So yeah, that you can play around with that for a while. One thing to be aware of is as you do that, it starts to blend the pixels together, and so you begin to lose finer details in the model, or in the photo rather. And so you're going to want to find a balance between that kind of smoothness you're looking for and actually preserving the different elements in the render. And so that looks pretty good. So we're going to click OK and zoom out to the larger image here. And so next, we're going to apply something that I actually just figured out this morning. So I don't think the file is attached, but I think it's a really cool element that you can get to work from the V-Ray exporter. And so we're going to place that, and this one is called Extra Tech. Hopefully this places center. It does, okay. And so this one is very interesting. It adds an extra layer of depth to the shadow that you have. And so we're gonna wanna select, in here, just above your layers, you're going to wanna select where it says normal and change that to multiply. And now you can see it really adds a layer of depth to that. But this is obviously a lot too much. So we're gonna wanna bring it down to about 20%. And you can see kind of the extra darkness and extra kind of quality to those shadows in the room. They become a little more vibrant, less flat, and a little bit more realistic. And so from there, once this goes away, we're going to want to maybe edit the background image, add some light to it. And to do that, we're going to open Camera Raw Filter. Give this just a moment. It'll come up with kind of, again, the generic editing tools where you can change the exposure and really brighten it up. You can change the contrast. And you're just going to want to find some balance in there for what you're interested in conveying. And now I won't say I'm the best at this kind of editing, but it's certainly useful. So we want it maybe to be a little warmer, make it feel a little more homey. And so that looks pretty good. Maybe just a little brighter. And then so we're going to select OK, and you'll see that translates into here. And there you have kind of in progress. And so the next one we're going to want to do is the diffuse light. And so we're going to want to place embedded the diffuse light. If I can find it. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have diffuse light. Okay, well, then the next one, and probably the most important among them, is the material ID. So that one you place on top, and it gives you a selection of all of the different materials. And so you can use your selection tool here, or the magic wand tool. Someone has posted in the chat. Okay. And so you can use this as a selection tool to really easily go through your model and select the different layers and different components. And so now you have a selection of the ceiling, or if you want a selection of the wall, or a selection of the couches, cushions, whatever you're trying to do there. And it translates back to, so say I want to select the floor. So now you have a direct access to edit the elements on the floor. And so I say the floor looks a little too bright. So you can come back down here and just quickly add a brightness contrast element on top of that. Make sure, use this tool here to make sure it's only affecting the layer below it. And you can begin to change that, and you can see that update live in the model in the background. So there you can give it kind of a darker hue. You can up the contrast and play around with it there. And you also have then a series of other elements that you can use as well. And I'm not going to go through them all, but there's definitely a lot of value in each one of them. And so, yeah, you can also select, because this is every component is a different color, where you have breaks and stuff, say up here, where normally I would select here and it breaks here. You can select the entire space by just turning off contiguous. And now the space is not restricted just to that, but to everything that is that color. And same here, the floor is separated into two pieces, but you can select, and it selects around just to capture that color as well. And so next we're going to go to the raw light. I'm going to turn that off and open raw light. Hopefully I have it saved. All right, I don't know why it keeps putting them very off center, but Control T will select that and allow you to move it uninterrupted from the other ones. So this is actually a raw shadow. Sorry about that. No, didn't mean to rotate it either. Enter. And so you're going to move that above the extra text channel. Oh, sorry, my light went out. I am in Slocum. Okay. And so you're going to change this one to a soft light in here. Select soft light, and then turn it down to say 30. And again, it'll start to kind of play around with the different lighting effects in the room and add a real level of softness to it. And then, so the last one we're going to import is the where is it? Refraction. And so we're just going to use this one to select the windows so that we can delete those out. And so you're going to use the quick selection tool up here. Make sure you're on the adding tool. You can either do that by hitting Control, and if you want the subtraction, you hit Alt. But we're going to stick to the add. And then you can use the brackets on your keyboard to either make the selection larger or smaller. And so we're just going to want to quickly select these different pieces here. Make that a bit smaller, select in there, and then select there. And then you can just turn this layer off, move down to this layer, and then just quickly delete it. Oh, shoot. Okay. So actually, never mind. We are going to save this selection. So save selection, and you can just name it Windows. And then you can go back to that selection at a later date, because right now we need to merge these. So here, actually, we're at a good point. Because we have all of these layers kind of compiled together, actually, an easier way to do this might be to use Control-Alt-Shift-E. No? Okay, there it goes. And so that just overlays everything that you have below into another layer. So even if I turn off all of the previous layers, we'll have the same image here in this one. And so we're going to call this one base image. And then we can go down, select everything below it, and group it. And so now we kind of have a cleaner file setup, or layer setup rather, and we can go back to then editing the windows. So going to go to select, load selection, and then find the one that we saved here in channel, click OK, and it should come up with that selection again. And so now to delete this, we're not going to hit delete, but instead we're going to come down here and use add layer mask. But before I do that, so example of what not to do is this will remove everything except what you want. So instead what we're going to do is go to select and where is it? Select inverse here at the top. And so that will then change the selection to the exact opposite. And we're just going to select that, and there you have the inverse selection. And so the next step here is going to be adding in the background image. So we're going to go to File, Open, and then find it's an image of New York City, I think labeled V-Ray Workshop Background Image that was sent out this morning. And so you have that here. So we're just going to copy that, Control-C into this image here and make sure it is below the image you're working on so that it comes in through the window there. And now there's a lot of different aspects to uploading an image as a background, and one of those that's really key is the lighting. And so now you see here that the lighting is actually coming from the right side of the image on the background, but coming from the left side of the image in the foreground. And so what we're going to do is we're going to edit, transform, flip horizontal. And so that will then flip the image so that the sun is coming from the correct direction. And then the next step is we're going to want to align all of the lines to the same or approximately the same horizon point. So you can see here we have a 2-point perspective one of the horizons going off the screen in this direction, and then the other horizon going off the screen in that direction. And so you're going to want to the best of your abilities, align all of these different components. And to do that, you're going to do edit, transform, perspective. And that will allow you to edit the image, shrink different sides, and just get it to fit that space that you're looking for. And so you can see this line and the upper lines are too low, so we're going to raise this portion until those start to match. And maybe we can shrink this down a little bit. Move it here, move that up. And just play around with this until you find something that fits into that form that you're looking for. Thankfully, because this isn't actually a specific render, we have a lot of flexibility here to kind of distort this image. But on an actual project that you're doing for Studio or something, you're going to want to be a little bit more sensitive with these edits and make sure that you're not just changing or distorting the view that is actually seen in reality. Kind of like one of the things that I did here was flipped the image. And of course now New York City is backwards, which in a studio project is not ideal because you want to represent kind of the reality of that image. So just something to be aware of there. And so we're going to say, sure, that looks all right. And so we're going to hit enter and finish that edit. Actually, I'm going to move it up a little bit. And so then the next thing we're going to want to do is this image really doesn't match the interior environment here. So what we're going to do is apply the raw camera filter to this image as well, or camera raw filter rather, sorry. And it'll bring up again this box, and you're just going to edit it until you think it matches the image on the interior. So you can just play around with all of these different elements and get it to a point where you say, okay, maybe that's going to match a bit better. And there you can see it really brightens it up and connects the interior with the exterior. And now I've noticed that my bottom line here is not actually aligned, so I'm just going to go in and fix that real quick. Again, with the perspective tool, just lift this side up. And this one I need just a little bit there. And enter, and that looks much better. Okay, and then the next thing is there's a lot of warmth in here, but not the image on the exterior is fairly cold. And so what we're going to do is add a new layer right above it. Find a nice, sorry, wrong color. Find a nice orange somewhere in here. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then go to, in the paint bucket tool, there's the gradient tool. So we're going to select that and then make sure you're using this radial gradient tool. And what we're going to do is just click and drag here. And you get this really awful looking orange block. But if you come over here and use it just as a screen, then it adds a nice kind of sun-like effect on there. And maybe that's a little too heavy, so you can turn that down maybe 70%. And it really starts to warm up the image on the exterior, which you can of course do also through the editing of the exterior image in the raw filter, which actually might be useful. So yeah, maybe just turn up the temperature a little bit, get it to match the interior a bit better. And so there you have that. And so the next thing we're going to want to do is actually put people into the render. And for this, I uploaded a girl walking. Let's see if this works. Okay, no. So what we're going to do is open that, and we're going to have to edit, because a lot of, very annoying, but a lot of PNGs on the internet actually aren't empty of the background. And so what you're going to want to do is go back to that selection tool and kind of just remove the background here. It should be pretty easy, pretty quick. If you can just go around and remove all of those excess pieces. All right, and so it looks pretty good. Maybe the shoulder needs some work. And so see, it came in a little bit on the shoulder here, so we're just going to use the subtraction tool and push it back out. Now it went too far, so we'll try to pull it back in. And that looks pretty good. Of course, if this were an actual assignment, maybe I would spend a few more minutes on that. And then we're just going to delete that and then select inverse and then Control C to copy, and then go back to this image and Control V. Now she's on the wrong layer, so we're going to just click and drag her to the top. And then going to edit and transform. In this one, actually, probably easiest here is to just use Control T for a free transform. And you can scale her and just, it allows you a lot more freedom in your movement here. And so you're going to want to make her about the right size, put her in the scene. But one thing that you'll notice is that it appears like the light is coming from her right, similar to the background image, and the shadow is being cast on her left side. So one thing that you can do to fix that, again, similar to the exterior image, is just to transform and flip horizontal. And there you go. She's looking a lot better. And then just make sure, again, she's about the right scale, and close that. It seems we have, okay. And so now, like the other images, maybe a raw camera. So you're just going to want to, again, add shadow here onto the floor to really look like she's in the image. So what we're going to do there is just paste another copy of her into this space here, and then edit free transform, which is also accessed by Control T, as you saw earlier, and then just kind of layer on the floor. All right. And then make sure that in general, she's facing the same direction as the shadows. So the border box of this should be approximately in line with the line of the shadow. And then what you're going to want to do is make a selection with the magic wand tool. Make sure you're on the appropriate layer and make sure sample all layers is off. And if you click, then it'll select everything but her. And then you're going to edit, or sorry, you're going to select inverse, and now you've selected the shadow here. And we're going to add a new layer and just simply paint that black. And there you go. And now you can turn that layer off below, and you have black mark. And so because the shadow, of course, is going to be below the person, you're going to want to do the same with the layers and move the shadow to be below the girl. And also, probably apply, you can go through these, find one that works. I'm going to say either soft light or multiply is going to be the best. We'll try multiply and then just reduce the opacity until it should match the shadows in the room. And there you go. And then, so maybe this isn't where you want to place the girl in the shadow, so you can select both of those and just move it. Maybe there. And then you zoom in and you see there's kind of this overlap between an existing shadow and this one. So you're going to go in, find the shadow, select it, and then use the polygon lasso tool to select the shadows in here. And then maybe get these ones too. And then all you're going to do is add a layer mask. I think I have that backwards, yes. Okay, so you're going to want to select inverse and then add the layer mask. And then that should crop out that and make it look a little smoother. Looks like maybe we need to edit the opacity on this a little bit and get it to match the shadows a little bit more closely. And maybe even trying different setting here might help get you to that goal. But it's this kind of thing that really takes up a lot of your time making these renders. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here all day and try to make that perfect, but you can start to see kind of how you might use that tool. And so there you have the scene. Yeah, I think that's about it. If anyone has any questions, again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. But yeah, please, with any questions, let me know.
Okay, well, no questions? Nobody has any questions?
You can also post in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat at the moment.
Yeah, and you can always email me or Tim and
Of course.
get back to you. Yeah, this was good though. I think you went through it pretty fast, which was nice.
Yeah, I know we're all on busy schedules. I may have skipped a few steps. As you see, you have a lot of different render elements that I didn't go through today, but you can on your own time kind of go through and apply the different settings to them and kind of learn for yourself. I think that's really the best way to do it. Because with me telling you everything to do, there's no troubleshooting or anything, and that's really how you learn. But I hope that you found this to be a useful introductory course. Of course, you can always find a lot more resources on YouTube. I know the school has access to Lynda, which is another software learning program, and I believe they have Photoshop and V-Ray as a part of that suite. And so there's a lot of resources here. As Gio said, you can also email us with any questions you have. So yeah, just good luck. And please, if you have any questions, post them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, Tim, and thank you everyone for coming. I hope people learned. Yes. I definitely learned a lot of things that I had no idea about. I thought I knew. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna end it then if there's nothing else.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you everyone for coming. It was very exciting. I'm always happy to do this. And thank you, Gio, for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. Okay, bye guys.
All
I'm
right.
gonna end it. Oh,
Bye,
someone
Gio.
already left.